Okay, people, what's good? V&V Podcast, episode 68. Me, Rory Spooner, James Beck, and Reece Henley. We're all back again with the news and the views. So let's get straight into it then, gents. Now, a topic we've been discussing this week that I think is going to maybe rear its head over the next couple of weeks, especially with the transfer window coming up, is Jack Grealish and where he goes next. Now, by the weekend, it looks like that Aston Villa could be down. They may even be down realistically tonight. We're recording the day of City, Watford and Villa, Arsenal. Both very unlikely to get points, but should Watford pick something up, Villa are pretty much done. So, moving forward, Jack Grealish. Now, I'll get your opinion on where I think he should go. Reece, I know obviously you're itching to get stuck into this already. I could tell by that look in your eye. You are desperate to tear into Jack Grealish. And where, lads, I want your opinion on where you think he should go as well. So initially, I'll start off with Manchester United. Now, this was a big debate in the WhatsApp group. Jack Grealish to Manchester United. I think Jack Grealish would be a perfect signing for Manchester United. Now, let me just expand on why I think that. Moving forward, if we go back to United Chelsea on the weekend just gone, the one thing I've noticed about Manchester United, especially over the past few games, is that Manchester United have really struggled when they've had to kind of delve deep into their squad. Now, that first 11 on paper is very strong, but there's very little behind it. And if you have an injury to a Pogba or Fernandes, all of a sudden, who are you relying on? Andreas Pereira? What? No, come on, as if. You can't go to him as your go-to guy. Now, Fernandes looked very tired. And Pogba, he does well from deep. But, if you're looking for someone who's a bit more of a creative force, you need to have a bigger squad. Someone like a Man City. You look at a City, they've got a Foden, they've got Bernardo Silva, they've got David Silva, should I say. They've got De Bruyne. Who else have they got? They've got various people, right, that can come in. United only have two creative midfielders. That can't last over a 60-game season. So for me, I look at a Grealish, I look at his stats. I think he would come in and be an excellent player to come in and play alongside a Pogba or Fernandes, or someone who can come in just as a squad player throughout the course of the season and make an impact. Feel free to let me know your opinion.
You go first, please.
I'll let you go.
With Jack Grealish, I do like him as a player. I think he's a good player. But I used to in the past see him a bit more like he could come into the United side. But from how they've evolved since lockdown, or since Bruno Fernandes, should I say, and until the FA Cup, they named unchanged sides for a few weeks back to back, which they just haven't done post Fergie, like ever. I don't really see where he would fit. And even though he would be at a snipped price because they'd be relegated, he would still cost a lot of money. Let's not get away from that. Maybe slightly less. And for me, he kind of plays the Bruno Fernandes position for Villa. And he's not going to get ahead of Bruno Fernandes there. He's not as good as Bruno Fernandes. And he'll probably cost more than Bruno Fernandes, which means if you look at the United way they play at the moment, which is a 4-2-3-1, I don't think he gets in that 3. Because if he plays left, he's not a traditional out-and-out winger, is he? He's a tricky midfielder, attacking midfielder, that can play out wide. But he's not like a quick, rapid winger that's going to like beat players, pull back.
That's very true. Very true.
So if we're going to sign him, which I don't think we will, but if we are, they're not going to sign him to play ahead of Bruno Fernandes, so he's going to play out wide. Is he then going to play out wide instead of Rashford? Or is he then going to play out wide instead of Greenwood? Or, do you know what I'm saying? And he's not going to play up front, obviously, that's with Martial. So I think that, although I do rate him a bit, I think that it will cost an awful lot of money to not really have a set place to put him in. I don't think he would start every game. I think he would be an expensive sort of in and out substitute. You referred to City. City, we don't play like City. Nobody plays like City, really. Maybe like a kind of Barcelona before. They've just got so many interchanging midfielders, like Mahrez, Bernardo Silva, De Bruyne, David Silva, Sterling. They used to have Sane. They all interchange. They're free spirits. That's not United. That's not really anybody else other than City. So I personally don't think he would work. I quite like him, although he's had a pretty poor run of form since the restart. Even though Villa have been pretty poor as well. But I'm not really into the idea of him coming in. I would take obviously Sancho. Obviously, it costs more money, it would cost, but I would rather have Sancho clear as day instead of Grealish coming in.
What are we saying, Reece? What do you reckon?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I mean, first of all, I think that the Grealish United rumours have really cooled over the last few months, which has coincided really with the form of Bruno Fernandes, and that's probably no coincidence. I mean, if you were to look at both, like you said, Beck, both play in very similar positions, and if we're talking about levels, Bruno Fernandes, he shouldn't even be in the same squad as Grealish. He's so much better. I don't think Grealish is likely to displace anyone out wide, not because I don't think he's better than Mason Greenwood, just because I don't think he's an out-and-out wide man, so it would be unfair to drop somebody who's in the squad as a winger. With Jack Grealish, I don't think he's good enough for a top four side. I think he's capable of the odd good performance. I think we're taking him a little bit out of context, because a lot of that Villa side are terrible. They really, really are full of a nucleus of really poor Premier League footballers. And so a player that's actually got a bit of quality, Jack Grealish, will stand out, and he will be the main man, which will, it will sort of exaggerate his ability. I think he's probably of an Everton type standard, mid-table Premier League. He can do a job. The question I would have for you guys is, what is your budget, do you think, for Manchester United?
God knows, it could be anything, to be honest with you. The United budget, right, that could range anywhere from 80 million to 280 million. You just don't know. You really just don't know.
I think probably, I think from a Man United perspective, taking into account COVID as well, you'd have to be looking at anywhere between 60 and 150 million.
What I would say is that I've read a lot of stuff about United's position financially, and I from what I gather, we aren't really that affected by COVID. It's a lot of some Premier League clubs are towards the lower end, and of course the other football league clubs. But
okay, then sure. But based on what we know of United's spending strategy, they're not going to give Ole 300 million to spend. So
I think a lot of it will be player sales as well, mind. I think you'll see a lot of player sales and money removed in terms of wages from.
My point being simply that Jack Grealish, especially if Villa go down, like you said, Beck, he's going to be a bit cheaper. But in the unlikely event that they do stay up, he is going to be worth. He's going to be
50 mil
valued at about 60, 70 million because he's young, because he's English, and because he's Aston Villa's main player, and he's a local lad. And clubs never like to sell a local lad. You look at Andy Carroll back in the day. So the question really is that amount of money worth it for a player that's going to sit in your bench? No. In any case, you'd shop abroad for a safe pair of hands out of the French league or the German league. I think if we look at, we'll probably come on to it a little bit later, but if we look at Kai Havertz, for example, that's a man of the same price tag as Jack Grealish. And when you look at the ability of both, I think Jack Grealish, if you were to sum him up as a player, he's a player who, takes a lot of time over his hair, and he wins a lot of fouls, but he doesn't really do much.
He does have beautiful hair, though. We do have to acknowledge that.
Wears socks really low as well.
He does need to get a pair of socks and a new pair of shin pads.
I mean, just kind of summarise, I would say that I don't think that United's position in the transfer market this year will be any different to any other. I think that if they want to spend that much money on a player or players, they will do so like before. But I do also think that it would be not smart money or a smart investment to throw 70 million on Jack Grealish.
Yeah. Do you know what I will say, though, is for some reason, and Reece makes a very interesting point about shopping abroad, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has some sort of British fetish, where we discussed this on the podcast when they signed Dan James. They bought Dan James for 21 million. At that point, if you had put an extra 10 down, you could have got a Hakim Ziyech. And the two are completely different animals. For some reason, and the Declan Rice rumour keeps coming round again, but I don't think Rice will go to
trash as well.
Yeah, so, there is some sort of British idea or fetish that Solskjaer has that makes him want those type of players. And that's why I think he'll push for a Grealish if he gets a chance.
Maybe it's something to do with that. When he was with United, obviously there was a good British nucleus then, and obviously they had a lot of success with that. But I think he'd be foolish to not realise that times have changed since then. And whilst United have a decent sort of number of British players in that squad, it's not quite the same as it was in the past. But he did buy Bruno Fernandes, so it does show that if the player is right for the right money, it's not like he won't go abroad. But yeah, I know what you're saying. He has made a couple of British signings, so be interesting.
I think the problem is there's not a large talent pool in England. There really isn't. For all of the hype around England's young English players, the young nucleus of players coming into the national team, are there really that many that you'd want in a title-winning squad? Really?
It's hard to say. They're still young. There's still a lot of wiggle room.
That may be available. For example, you look at Ben Chilwell. You look at Joe Gomez. You got your Dean Hendersons, your Nick Popes. The goalkeepers. There's lots of good goalkeepers. But when you look at
midfielders
that may be available, attackers that may be available, are there really anyone?
I think a lot of them are at big clubs already, though. You look at a Foden, he's at a Man City. Hudson-Odoi, he's at a Chelsea. Loftus-Cheek, he's at a Chelsea. Greenwood's at a Manchester United. I can't think of too many.
Those players that you named good enough to.
What about them?
I think so. Yeah, I think they are.
Throwing a name out there. What's your guys' thoughts on Harry Kane currently in terms of sort of he's come back from injury? He seems to be hitting form again. He looked very, very good against Leicester.
I think.
And the question I would pose with regards to Harry Kane is that he's been sort of rumoured to potentially move maybe to Real Madrid, possibly United, or just leaving Spurs over the last couple of years. Do you not think it's going to get to a point now for Harry Kane within the next year or two where if nothing transpires under this Mourinho experiment, I think he is going to want to win trophies or go for just a bigger club, a bigger money, bigger move.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, look, the way I've viewed Harry Kane for the last 2 or 3 seasons is very much that when Spurs play well, he gets goals. But if we compare him to Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, I think Aubameyang's outscored him and most of the people in the league this year, and Arsenal have been dreadful for the majority of the season, bar maybe the last 5 or 6 games. So the question I have is, why can't Kane reproduce the same results when Tottenham don't play well? Kane really needs to have chances presented to him.
Yeah.
So it's good for Spurs that he's back in form. But they really will, in order for that to continue, they will need to spend £100 million on a world-class playmaker for him. And I don't think Jack Grealish is that guy, going back to the conversation that we were having.
Yeah. I don't think he's that guy, but part of me does think that they might make him that guy.
I think he could be a good fit for Jack Grealish, don't get me wrong, but I don't think he's up to it.
Yeah, the Spurs link for Grealish, I think Pochettino wanted to take him, but it fell through. Maybe I'm wrong in saying that. There was definitely some strong rumour that Grealish was about to go there. Going back to Harry Kane, Becky, as well, I think this coming the next season, when this one is done and it rolls over, I think that'll be his last season at Spurs. If there's no real improvement in that Spurs team, the Euros then becomes his shop window, and I think he's gone.
I think the real interesting catalyst for any move of that kind would be the day that Karim Benzema gets stood down at Real Madrid.
Correct. I was just about to mention them.
There'll be several strikers in the world who will be eyeing up a move to Real Madrid at that stage. You could cite Mbappe, Haaland. You could cite Lewandowski or Kane, Aubameyang, Lacazette. All these strikers would all be saying to their agent, "Get me a move into Real Madrid," because I think they've won the league somehow. Zidane's done a remarkable job this year. Granted, I think Barcelona have been up to much, especially defensively, but they are in a squad in transition. They are bringing in a lot of young players, and they will need 1 or 2 world-class players to cement that up. The transfer to Hazard hasn't worked. He's had 1 league goal this season. So, yeah, Harry Kane could go to Real Madrid. He'd have the chances.
Yeah, interesting. Kane, the whole Benzema situation is going to be, that's going to start. There's two people that are going to retire. Well, three. There's going to be Benzema, there's going to be Messi, and there's going to be Suarez. And when those three go, and they'll all probably go roughly around the same time, you're going to see some massive transfers. You look at the three big names I would point out there. Okay, four big names I would point out there. You've got Harry Kane, you've got Lautaro Martinez, you've got Mbappe, and you've got Haaland. And those four will be fighting for the positions at those clubs. So that's going to be interesting over the next maybe 2 to 3 years.
That's whoever emerges in that time as well.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, interesting, lad. So just to clarify then on the Grealish subject, we'll just tie it up very quickly. So for me, if I pick a club for him, I'm going to be biased. I'm going to say United because I think he'd be a good squad player and he'd do well at United. Reece, you're saying in Everton would be a good move for him?
Yeah, somewhere around there, yeah.
Okay, Becky, who are you saying?
Spurs.
Spurs. Okay, good shout. Okay, lovely. Moving on to another talented British lad. We mentioned him on a previous podcast, and again, he was linked with Manchester United, was Jude Bellingham. Now, Jude Bellingham to Borussia Dortmund. What do you think of that move, lads? Do you think that's the right move for him?
Well, the first thing that I thought was actually not about Jude Bellingham. It was about Jadon Sancho.
Okay.
Could this signing pave the way for someone like Jadon Sancho to leave the club?
That's what the rumours are saying.
Are they? They're not. They're a totally different player, though, aren't they? Them two.
He's more of a midfielder.
I think the Bellingham signing is related to finances. Dortmund, I think, financially need to make a certain amount of money because of COVID-19, and obviously them spending relatively big on Bellingham takes a large chunk of their finances away. So I think that's what people are kind of putting two and two together and getting for. I'm pretty sure Dortmund financially have to sell Sancho, not to necessarily stay afloat, but just to balance the books with everything that's going on.
My opinion on Bellingham, I can't profess to have watched too much of him. He seems a decent young player.
Yeah.
He's played over 40 times in the Championship this year, and by all accounts has been impressive. On the one hand, that for me doesn't qualify you to get a Champions League move, no matter what age you are. Of course, yeah, you invest in potential, but it just doesn't qualify you to get that move. However, that being said, the Dortmund scouts are very rarely wrong.
Yeah, they see something in him. The Dortmund scouts, they're very good at analysing young players and kind of giving them the stepping stone because they're not stupid. They know they're not going to be there forever. But the business model is buy young, sell high.
Yeah, what I would say is that we go back a couple of weeks ago and we spoke about Bellingham to United, and if you remember correctly, I said at the time that I think the best move and the one that he will end up going to is the Dortmund move.
Yeah.
Because, like Reece mentioned, they're very rarely wrong. And you look at a Sancho situation, you know, when they took Sancho, did they think that he was going to be the world star straight away that he's turned out to be? Probably not. You know, the scouts have looked into him and they thought he's got huge potential, and he obviously started with coming on as subs. You know, he wasn't just going to go straight and walk into their Champions League lineup. He's come on and he's developed, and they must be looking at Bellingham in a similar kind of situation in terms of that this kid's got a lot of potential. He's very young. He's playing every week in a tough league in the Championship. I'm not saying it's the highest quality, but it's a tough league. We can nurture him, and we think we can nurture him into something that's very, very good. I don't think there's many better clubs than Dortmund to do that, if any. So
yeah, it's interesting that Dortmund is such a big club, but young players can go there, and the spotlight just isn't for some reason it's not as intense, which I find interesting in the Bundesliga because there's so much focus on Bayern.
That's the Bundesliga in essence, though, isn't it? You can go to any club in the Bundesliga as a young player from the UK.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, obviously, you look at the players they've got, you know, Erling Haaland, Giovanni Reina, I think, is only 17 as well. Sancho may still be there as well. There's no guarantee he's going to leave. Throw in Bellingham as well. You probably won't see the best of Bellingham for another maybe 3 or 4 years when he really starts to sort of, you know, his body is fully developed, his brain is starting to fully develop. He may have to learn the language, you know, and then sort of, you know, get used to German culture. So I think initially it would be wrong to kind of heap a ton of pressure on him over the next maybe 18 months, 2 years. But beyond that point, I think you could really see an interest in Jude Bellingham. He's clearly a talented boy. What I will say, I commend his parents for making what I would call the right decision. Because the Manchester United move is the sexy move, it's the attractive move. I know Dortmund are apparently offering more money, which is interesting. But he could have easily gone, you know what, I'll go to United. I get the biggest move in English football. I'll go there, I'll sit behind Fred for the next 3 years, and I'll pick up a nice contract and, do a little bit here and a little bit there. But his parents have obviously looked at it and gone, no, that's not for you. We want you to be the best person you can be. And there's no better way of developing, not just as a footballer, but as a person, to go live in a new country, learn a new language, learn a new culture. I think he'll develop very quickly out there. I'm a big fan. I've only seen him a few times, but I've seen enough to suggest that he's quality.
And I predict that United will sign him in over 4 years' time for about 80 million, and he'll be the next Ander Herrera.
Do you reckon? Yeah.
Just like
more than that. If Ed Woodward's still in charge at that point, bro, you might want to stick an extra zero on the end of that. United will overpay like fuck for Bellingham. But yeah, all in all, lads, what are we saying? A great move for Bellingham?
I think it's the best move for him. Yeah.
For Bellingham, a great move. For Dortmund, I guess it remains to be seen.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, cool. Lovely. Right. So, Bellingham done out the way. Let's move on to some other news. So, the 5 substitutes rule. Now, I didn't know about this, Becky, till you mentioned it to me, that it was being implemented for next season. So, teams will now be able to make 5 substitutes. They can have 9 substitutes instead of 7. Which is interesting because as a player that may be on the fringes of a squad who's relatively unhappy, shall we say, you can be part of a more inclusive environment. You probably feel like, you're maybe part of the team more, and you may even get more chances as well. Is it a good thing or is it a bad thing?
Well, for me, and it has been discussed by a couple of pundits as well, I think it's an awful thing, personally, really? For 2 reasons. The first reason is I think it's massively beneficial for the top clubs, and I think it's really, really, really harsh on the small clubs who don't have the depth and the strength. You look at, we mentioned City earlier, United, Liverpool, Chelsea. Having 5 subs, they can more often than not replace quality with quality throughout those 5 substitutes. You go towards the bottom end of the table, even up towards mid-table, and those teams are going to struggle to do that at all. So the gulf in potential substitutions over 5 for me is too much, and it favours the big teams. Yeah. The second problem I have with it is what happens to a game these days when loads of subs are made? It just goes flat. It dies. It takes a sting out of the game. The players, the chemistry just isn't there. You see teams make 3 or 4 subs, and the game's different. It goes to the dogs, and I hate that. I think 3 subs was enough. It was always enough. I understand why they went to 5, but they don't need to go to 5. No, they said that they put out that they can keep 5, but it's up to the league to decide, and the league have decided on 5. But personally, I think it's a really poor call, and I hope they overturn it.
Yeah, wasn't it?
Well, to be honest, I agree with you. I mean, but your points are valid. I share your opinion on being able to replace quality with quality. I share your opinion on the fact that it does slow down games. On the flip side of that argument, though, the player welfare has got to be key, and I guess the sports scientists involved, are obviously saying that due to the shortened pre-season, the lack of preparation time, and the extraordinary nature of what this is going to do to their bodies compared to usual training schedules and preparation schedules and things like that. The last thing you'd want to be doing is watching players all tear their muscles and things before the Euros because of extreme fatigue. So I mean, on that, if that's the reason that they've made this decision, then I support it, regardless of what it means for the football. Interesting about the perspective on the team, that the top teams being able to dominate the games later on because of that reason. I don't actually find that since Project Restart has occurred, that the top teams have been able to, apart from maybe Manchester United, really, really keep in a good run of form. So I don't know if it necessarily statistically backs up the theory that the top teams are going to have that advantage. But I mean, yeah, I agree with you. It is going to make some games go a little dull. But I mean, realistically, player welfare has got to be key, and that's why they've made the decision.
Yeah. The thing is as well, if Boris Johnson is correct and goes ahead with what he says about maybe crowds coming back later this year, I think a lot of the big teams' inconsistency is down to the post-lockdown fans, kind of things like that. And if we get stadium capacities back to full again, I do think the top sides will find their consistency again, and that factor would come more into play. The other point I forgot to mention was the 5-sub rule, Reece, as I'm sure you would also sympathise, is a nightmare for us fantasy league managers. And it just makes things so frustrating and unpredictable, especially when you're trying to predict Pep Guardiola's next move. Trying to put a Man City player, Spooner, which you'll know about next season because we're going to really rope you into it properly next season.
Oh, mate. Honestly, my head goes playing that. Honestly, I can't handle it.
Trying to predict who's going to play for Pep Guardiola is one of life's biggest mysteries. And you give him 2 more subs, I can't deal with that. I just can't deal with it. It just makes my head hurt thinking about it. But yeah, I understand, like Reece said, there's obviously like a medical reason why they've offered it, and with what's going on. But I don't know, just meet them in the middle, go for 4.
I mean, you've got big pundits like Gary Neville going on and on and on about how it's a bad idea. Okay, and we all understand that why, for the reasons that you've outlined, Beck, that is a bad idea. But then, if we fast forward 8-9 months, and Raheem Sterling, Jordan Henderson, and Trent Alexander-Arnold all get injured because of extreme fatigue towards the end of the season during a title running, he's going to be crying then because.
Yeah, I'm with you. He'll be the first to moan about it, and we've got to understand as well, not just the Euros this year, lads. The whole thing is very breathless. You look at from sort of Project Restart. Okay, you get that out the way. Okay, you go straight into the next season. Okay, that's fine. Then you're straight into the Euros. Okay, then straight into the next season, and then you're going straight into then the World Cup in 2022. Yeah. And then a lot of these lads aren't going to get a break until 2022.
And I think as well, when you compare, let's say, a World Cup or a Euros of years gone by, what do we see? Straight, at the start of the season, we'll see Sergio Aguero not play the first game, or we'll see, one of Manchester United players, not play the first game because they've been at the World Cup or the later stages of a World Cup. So, speaking from a sports science point of view, then there has to be the reason that these players need that extra time, and they're not going to be given that extra time this year. They're going to be given even less time. So, I suppose this is actually going to be able to help those players who will be in need of, 5 or 6 game layoff at the start of the season.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, even I touched upon it earlier on, lads. Okay. Watching Bruno Fernandes over the past 2 or 3 games, he's looked absolutely exhausted. I know he scored and he's had maybe a couple of assists, but he's generally looked done in. And if that's the state that players are going to get to by the end of next season, that's very problematic. So
yeah, I know what you're saying. The fixture list just won't be as clogged over the next season. It will kind of sort itself out a bit.
Well, you hope so. That's the thing. We just don't know, do we?
It's just the thought of United's exciting lineup as it's been the past few weeks being disturbed. You go as it is, and then all of a sudden you bring on Lingard, you bring on Bailly, you have to bring on Dan James, and then plus like McTominay, and I'm just like, oh no, like could we just stop at 3?
I know what you mean, bro. I
don't need Lingard on the pitch. Just don't need it.
When Grealish replaces him in the summer, I'll just say I told you so. But yeah, no, it's interesting, lads. We'll come back to the 5 subs rule, obviously. I think the more it evolves, the more we can kind of analyse it and sort of talk about it. But I'm for it. I'm not necessarily against it in the short term. Long term, I want to see it go back to 3, but I'm well aware over the next couple of years that it's going to be hectic for everyone involved. But that's cool. Other news, the Ballon d'Or. Now, again, Becky, you my main source of news, bro. You're like my fucking MSN.com. Like, you are giving me all the news. I don't get it. I literally don't get any news other than from you and Reece. So talk to me, Becky, about the Ballon d'Or situation. I'm still not necessarily fully up on it. What is the situation regarding the Ballon d'Or?
Yeah, it's very straightforward, really. And when I read the article on it, I saw it on Twitter, and then I read further into it, and there's not very much information to give. It's just due to the situation that's gone on worldwide and the disruption that it's had on football. which we can see because football's been a lot different since it's come back. They've just decided not to run the Ballon d'Or competition for this year. Didn't think that any player has been given a long enough run of form to show that they are or aren't the best player in the world. So they've just decided not to do voting on it this year.
Interesting.
It's a very disappointing time for St. Maximin, like Reece said, who I'm sure would have been many people's vote this year. And obviously Dan James is going to miss out just on that as well. So,
Dan James shocked missing on a technicality. Well, lads, if you were to pick a Ballon d'Or winner, who would you pick? If someone said to you now, okay, based upon the information you've gathered at this point, you can pick a Ballon d'Or winner, who would you pick?
Well, let's exclude Messi and Ronaldo from the argument.
Joe, before you give your answers though, I do think it's very hard to think pre-lockdown and remember how brilliant some people were. The one that springs to my mind, take Messi and Ronaldo aside, is Lewandowski for me.
Yeah. Interesting.
That would be my choice.
There's a few contenders, isn't there? I mean, we're excluding Messi and Ronaldo from the argument, James. I'm sure you'd pick Ronaldo. I'd pick Messi because the award should go to the world's best player. And
I do think though that Lewandowski's had one of his best ever years, and his numbers are better than Ronaldo or Messi's this year.
Fantastic, but if we're looking at performances and how good a player is, then you got to give it to the world's best player, haven't you, I suppose. But if we're excluding them from the argument, I agree with you. Lewandowski's numbers this year have been fantastic. I don't think you could probably look too far beyond him. I mean, an honourable mention probably for Bruno Fernandes, whose numbers have been also incredible, albeit mostly in a Portuguese league. But he's been very good this season as well. De Bruyne as well. If we think pre-lockdown especially, De Bruyne, I know he's had problems with injuries, but when he's been on the pitch has just been unbelievable.
Yeah. Sadio Mane, Virgil van Dijk, they'd probably be on the list.
So you took that would be my choice, Sadio Mane.
Do you know what I will say as well, though? What is interesting is that I'm pretty sure there's a clause in the contract of Bruno Fernandes that if he got nominated in the top 5 or top 3 of Ballon d'Or, that United had to pay them an extra 10 million euros. And now, obviously, now the Ballon d'Or doesn't take place this year. That's another year without payment for them. I'm not saying he 100% would have been.
No, but this is how Ed Woodward negotiates contracts, right? He gives you hypotheticals. So he's like, what we'll do is basically if Bruno Fernandes, if he gets nominated for the Ballon d'Or, we'll give you the West Stand. And all of a sudden, he thinks it's a good idea, and United end up paying a shit ton of money, right, for these weird clauses. Just pay the money up front.
In the last few years, when we've thrown those, if they get nominated in top 5 of the Ballon d'Or clauses, the players never have. They never turn out to be that good, so we've never paid them. But I think in Bruno's case, if he keeps playing like this, he might have been in the top 10 nominations for the Ballon d'Or this year.
Yeah.
And if he gets even better, then who knows, where he could place next year.
Yeah, the question is, I mean, like anything, the question is, can he replicate that form next season? And personally, my gut feeling says no. But I think he's a good enough player that it wouldn't surprise me if he did.
Yeah. So going back to your picks then. So I'll go Sadio Mane. Becky, you going Lewandowski?
Yeah.
Who are you picking, Reece?
Yeah, I think I'd go Lewandowski as well. But I think me and Vec would agree that it would be one of the two usual candidates.
Yeah, I'd imagine so. All right, cool. Interesting. Very interesting. Now, we'll kind of wrap it up with Leeds United. We do have to give them some congratulations for getting back to the Premier League. They are a massive club as well. I mean, we want the biggest clubs in the Premier League. With all due respect to a Norwich, they do have quality players. They didn't show it this season, but somebody with the prestige of a Leeds United and the rivalry they have with a lot of clubs certainly makes it more interesting. What's your take on Leeds going up, lads? Do you think they'll do well next season? What do you see them doing?
Well, I think it's one big club down with Villa and one big club up with Leeds. Like you said, with them being a massive club, that brings a lot of love and a lot of hate, mainly hate for them from many other fans. And I think straight away, if they don't do well or don't start off well, there's going to be many people praying that they go straight back down. Do you know what I mean? There's going to be a lot of people who dislike them, almost like a Villa.
Oh, yeah.
They do need to strengthen them, as they've gone up, relatively comfortably in the end. But make no mistake, they will need to strengthen. I'm intrigued to see Calvin Phillips. There's a lot of talk about Calvin Phillips being the best player in the Championship, or at least the best midfielder in the Championship. And there was even talk about people on Sky Sports, TalkSport, in the previous months before lockdown about how he, even though he's never played in the Premier League, he's a better choice for England than the likes of Harry Winks and Eric Dyer. That's how good people were saying that he was. So I'll leave my judgment out on Calvin Phillips. I'm excited to see how good he really can be, if anything, next season. Like you said, but I haven't watched loads of Leeds United. I'm intrigued to see a big club back in the Prem and see how they get on.
Yeah,
agreed.
I think I think Leeds are going to be a very interesting case next year, because they'll have one of the best managers in the league, in Mark Bielsa. So that straight away, that's a positive sign for them. When Newcastle went up a few years ago, I think if we compare the two, because they are similar cases, they had one or two decent players, but they had a lot of dross. But they had a manager who really was, one of the world's leading managers. And when you come up with a manager like that versus coming up with a manager like, I don't know, Daniel Farke or Dean Smith, or these managers that come up this year, I think that there's definitely way in your favour. And what you're saying about Calvin Phillips as well is spot on. He's had an absolutely brilliant season with Leeds. He's a local lad as well, so I doubt he's going to be inclined to leave anytime soon. I think that'll be sort of a similar story to Jack Grealish. But yeah, he's been one of the shining lights in that Leeds squad, and I wouldn't be surprised if he got into the Euros next season, if he can replicate that form in the Premier League, which is never straightforward. The thing with Leeds is that they want to be challenging for Champions League football. The owners actually said that he sees them as a Premier League side. Now they've done that, but realistically he sees them as a Champions League side, and that's the vision. They are a long way from that, so they need to be able to sort of walk before they can run. I think looking at their squad, they need to invest in a couple of centre-halves. I think one of their standout players this year has been Ben White, but he's actually been a loan player. So he's not going to be there next season. They've also had to sign, I think it's Kenny Augustine, who's barely played from this year. But they've triggered a loan to buy option on one of their players, Kenny Augustine, and they just don't have him in their plans. So straight away, signing two centre halves, two Premier League quality centre halves, as well as Augustine, is going to chip into their budget. I don't think they'll be able to make Ben White permanent because he is attracting Premier League interest. Personally, I think they're going to struggle. I don't think they're going to have the war chest that they need, especially taking into account COVID. If fans can come back, that'll be mega for Leeds, because Elland Road is...
Yeah, it'll be bouncing.
It'll be bouncing, especially to come back to Premier League, if they come back. I think that is a massive if. Without fans, hypothetically speaking, and without a massive budget, I think they'll struggle.
Yeah. I mean, I think they'll have a decent budget. I think the owners will give a bit of something. But then I talked about the Norwich experiment, how there's one extreme to the other, isn't it? It's what Norwich tried to do, and it's what Fulham and Aston Villa tried to do. You need to get that right. If they're going to pump money into it, they have to invest it. They have to invest it well. Do you know what I mean? And that's easier said than done. Because you don't disrupt a whole team and just sign like 8 or 9 players. But then they'd be naive to think that 1 or 2 is just going to be enough. You look at like one of their best attacking players this year has been Pablo Hernandez, and he's been very, very good. But he's probably their best, if not one of their best attacking options. And he was in the Premier League a long, long time ago, and almost seemed like he ran his race back then. And he's coming back now. And if you're going to be entering the Premier League, trying to compete and to stay up, and with visions of higher, with Pablo Hernandez as your best attacking option, I think you're in trouble. And that's no disrespect to Pablo Hernandez, but people need to realise, we always say there's levels to this game, and you aren't going to make a statement in the Premier League with just someone like Pablo Hernandez, because Premier League defences and Premier League managers, their levels above that.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. Pablo Hernandez can't cut it in the Premier League. He wasn't even playing for a Swansea team that was on its way down. He played for them when they had Sigurdsson and they had a nucleus of good attacking players, and he just couldn't fit in. This is a side that Wayne Routledge got into and did a job, and Pablo Hernandez just couldn't do it. You look at their central striking options as well, and they are really poor. I think you look at the teams that have gone up this year, and they had poor striking options, but Patrick Bamford is their main striking option.
Oh, that all kicked off on Twitter today. I was looking at Bamford. Somebody put Patrick Bamford won't cut it in the Premier League, and then obviously he responded with the sleeping emojis. So he feels like he's got a point to prove.
If you look at Patrick Bamford's stats this year, he needs something like 8 or 9 clear-cut chances to get a goal. His conversion rate, I think he's the top goal scorer in the Championship, or one of the top goal scorers in the Championship. Leeds have made lots of chances this year, but he doesn't take a lot of them. He seems to be the striking equivalent of Kepa, the goalkeeper. He just doesn't seem to be doing much with the chances that he's getting. So I think they're going to need to sign creativity. They're going to need to sign a finisher. They're going to need to sign 2 centre halves, and probably one or two other areas where they're not strong anyway. They're going to need a lot.
Say a prayer for Brentford as well, because it was seemingly all in their hands, wasn't it? West Brom lost, and all they needed to do was just to get a draw, just to get above them into the position. And they lost to a Stoke side, which in 17th, that they looked almost like absolutely guaranteed to beat. And we're speaking about good strikers and good forward players. I really like the look of Ollie Watkins, and I'm sure he's like the Championship top goal scorer. And I would have been intrigued to see a side like as small as Brentford get promoted, and then how he would have done. But Patrick Bamford, he would obviously say that, wouldn't he, Spooner? People are calling him out. He's not going to say, he'd probably be quite shit in the Championship, to be fair.
As a man with pride, you've got to back yourself.
Yeah.
Even if you have that element of doubt, male pride goes a long way to secure it.
I mean, I go back to it. If they're going to go to the to the Premier League with Bamford as one of their leading lines, I mean, they can prepare for relegation already.
Just touching upon very quickly, lads, before we wrap it up, obviously clubs that have gone up and done well. I think the perfect example is Wolves. I think Wolves are the shining example. If you have an ideology and a philosophy, you buy the right players that fit into that ideology and philosophy, you are going to do very well. There's one player I very like, I really like him in the Championship, and that's Benrahma. Now, if you're Leeds and you're looking at Brentford's situation, Brentford, they bottled it, as you said, Becky. They really bottled it, and that will be going into their mind in the playoffs. They're going to be like, no, can we do it? Can we not do it? There's always that element of doubt. So if you're a Leeds, irrespective of whether Brentford go up or not, do you try and pinch a Benrahma? Do you go, okay, let's start with him then, because he's a very good football player?
Well, let me ask. If you've got a limited budget and you need to sign Premier League quality players, you could, in theory, look to the Championship for a somewhat cheap option, between 15 and 30 million more than likely, for a creative player or a good player.
Yeah,
he could come into your team and he could be fantastic. But what if you sign a Maddison, which is great news, and he propels you, and that's fantastic. But what if you sign a Ross McCormack?
I mean, it's the chance you take, right?
These two players have both come from the Championship Premier League clubs, or clubs trying to go to the Premier League and not done it.
Like a Jermaine Beckford, do you know what I mean? He's another one.
When you've got to buy quality all over the pitch, do you really want to be taking chances on players, or do you want to make sure that you sign someone you know is Premier League quality? It's in safe hands.
Yeah. I'm with you. I think Benrahma is Premier League quality. I think he deserves a chance, but I'm though.
The thing is, there's no problem with trying to get a blend. Do you know what I mean? If they've, already signed 2 or 3 Premier League quality players to go up with them, then dipping in and pinching someone like a Benrahma off of Brentford if they don't go up is a great, then the fans won't get on your back then, because you're trying to blend sort of really promising, potentially Premier League talent with others, So the thing is, with Brentford could still get automatically promoted. The Championship is a crazy league, and you've got
the most bizarre league ever.
Yeah, Fulham, West Brom, and Brentford are all sort of within a point or so of each other. on paper, Brentford have got the easiest last game against Barnsley. We're in the relegation zone. I think West Brom have got QPR and Fulham have got Wigan, I believe. So they've all got very winnable games, but that's a lottery, is that league. So any one of those three teams will join Leeds. I think it'll be Brentford, but
it's going to be one to watch.
Obviously.
It is indeed, lads. Okay, we'll wrap it up there. Everybody make sure you like and subscribe, do the usual stuff. Add us all up on the social media platforms as well. Like I said last week, we're all sociable guys. We're here to talk. If you want to talk about Jeffrey Epstein, we'll talk about that. If you want to talk about football, we'll talk about that. If you want to talk about climate change, we'll talk about that as well. You're talking some very well-rounded individuals. So yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe. We will be back next week. Hopefully we'll have some guests coming up as well too. And if anybody has any guest suggestions, feel free to send them over. And yeah, we'll see you next week, people. Take care. Ciao.